So I'm Mark Christopher, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm grateful to be here tonight. Go Canes, right? 3 minutes before they move on in the playoffs. So, but I'm here. So the truth is, I'm going to start with a little truth. Is I'd rather be at home watching the Hurricanes game, but I'm here because I want to stay sober, and that's just the truth. That's what I'm going to try to tell you tonight, some truth, and maybe hopefully share some hope. I'm going to tell you what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now best I can. And Kurt seen me walking down the hill coming in here, and he said, "Hey, can you give me the short version so I can go home?" And I said, "Yeah, life sucked. I did AA, and life's really good." And I said, "There it is." And that's it. And it really is that simple. It didn't seem like it when I was going through it, but looking back on it, and I'm still in it, you know. But looking back on it, it really was that simple. If I'll just do what I'm told. So my sobriety date is 6/24/2011. I picked my one and only, and I'm not bragging about it. It's just what happened. I was 44 when I got it, so I think that had a lot to do with it being my one and only white chip. It was a little late in life, but I picked it up at a Saturday night meeting in Rockingham on Febble Road at the church there. And Ron, the cook at the treatment center I was in, he was the first guy to congratulate me on being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't know the magnitude of that when he first did it, but he meant it, you know. And my wife still has that white chip in her change purse. I seen it the other day. That purse is, I'll tell you something about my getting here, but I love to talk about being here. That purse she keeps the white chip in, you know, when I was reading the book in treatment, we had to read it. I didn't do the best with following directions in treatment, but I did read it with my sponsor, and I remember Bill Wilson talking about stealing out of his wife's slender purse. And I've done that very thing. I remember taking $20 out of a purse. We had a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old when I come in here, two boys, and they're 25 and 23 now. And I remember she had two 20s in her pocketbook, and I stole one of them because I was sick and I had to go do what I do, you know, so I wouldn't be sick. So my story includes some other stuff besides alcohol. Out of respect for Alcoholics Anonymous, I won't talk about that a whole lot, but it is part of my story. I started drinking real early in age. I started when I was about 12, you know, dabbling. I started smoking cigarettes when I was in the 8th grade, right over here at Aberdeen Middle. It's closed now, but I remember we'd smoke cigarettes on the way to school, you know, riding our bikes, and I started smoking some other things shortly after that, and then started drinking. And the way drinking started for me was just having some fun. Like my mom and dad were pretty strict, and we would go to the old, where Texas Roadhouse is now. There used to be a cinema there. It was, yeah, a lot of guys nodding their head. My age or older remember that, but anyway, it was called Town and Country, but I was supposed to go, like every Friday I was allowed to go to the movies. And I had a curfew of like 11 o'clock, and we would tear out, we could walk through the woods. I grew up about maybe 4 or 5 miles from here on Crest Drive behind Poplar Street over there, and went to church at that little church down there in Aberdeen. It's not little, it's a big church, Page Memorial Methodist. This is my stomping ground, you know. Got first DWI I ever got, was the night I turned 21, and it was right up here at the stop sign where it meets US 1. Just all around this building. She never came around it. Wish I had it, but it is what it is. But anyway, we would tear off like we're going to the movies, and we never go to the movies. We had people that would buy us things like TJ Swan, Boone's Farm, whatever we could get them to buy for us, and we'd go sit under a dogwood tree and drink. And then started drinking liquor, and I never drinking liquor. I'd have to drink a little chaser. and then drink a little liquor, and then some more chaser, because I hated the taste of it, just to get it in my gut. And then once I got it in my gut, I was good to go. Later in life, I just straight vodka out of the bottle, just I just acquired a taste. But so when I was raised with 3 other brothers. My mom was just a good country girl from Dublin, North Carolina. I remember my dad didn't make a whole lot of money, and he brought a whole lot less than he made home. My mom was a very Christian woman. She made sure we were in church most Sundays. She prayed and sang hymns, and knew for sure she loved us. I can hear right now. Me and John were talking about. She died my 2nd year in recovery, and it was a sad day, but it wasn't a bad day because I was in recovery. Right, I could be there to do what I needed to do. My dad died. I wasn't in recovery, and that's a whole nother story. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about that. We'll see. But my mom, I can hear her right now at night. She'd say, "Good night, sweet dreams. God bless you. I love you. Say your prayers." Every night of my life, I can remember her saying that, and I'd say it back. And she'd read the upper room to us. She'd tell us things like, count your blessings when you're having a bad day. A lot of the same stuff I heard when I come into the rooms. She prayed for me a lot. I remember her looking at me later in life. I was sitting in the living room at her house. I had long since moved out. And she looked at me and she said, "Son, I don't know what's the matter with you, but I hope you figure it out." But she raised us. I was a knee baby, if you know what that is. I was next to the youngest. I was around for about 8 years, and then another baby come along, and I don't know whether I had anything. I kind of felt like, I'm not blaming them, but I kind of felt like I got lost in the wash. But what I really got to do was about anything I wanted to do, because they did it with a baby, and I got another brother that's was a little wild at the time. He got his act together, but I never really got mine together until I come in here. But so she raised us in church, and so I tell people this little thing here. I remember I went to elementary school over in Berkeley, right off 211, and I remember sitting in a 4th grade class. This is a really good memory. I remember this just like it was yesterday, and I was looking out a window over the playground, and I remember thinking, "Wonder what's the matter with me? Wonder why I'm so nervous." I had no idea that I was just scared of everything. I wouldn't tell you either. Now, I didn't think it was right to be scared of nothing, but my mama, I think, knew it the whole time. My brothers refer to me as the golden one. Mama held me a little closer. She tried to take a little closer, a little more care of me. I think she knew something was going on with me. It was a little different than my brothers, So my doubts with God, so I knew when I was younger we'd go to church and life was good, and I felt like I knew about God, and I prayed, I did all those things, and looking back on it, I believe it was working, But here's what happened with me is there's a lot of chaos in my house, and Big Book calls it calamity. And that word really fits what was going on in my house. And, so like I did have a fundamental idea of God deep down in me. My mom had helped me. She fostered it, honed it, taught me about it. But my dad was doing some other things. See, he's dead. But I'm just going to say, I believe he was one of us, and he just didn't know it. He never had the opportunity to be enlightened or gain insight into a disease and then a treatment of Alcoholics Anonymous. So my mom, she's this real spiritual lady. She prayed all the time. And then I'd see that when I was young. And then my daddy would torture her. And I remember thinking this. I remember thinking, like, where is God now? She's been praying to him, telling us to pray to him, but where is he now? So I started to doubt God. And I think it started way back then, and just completely, just what the book says, irritable, restless, discontent, full of fear. I had no idea. It's just the way I was. I was never good enough in my mind. I've heard Tom stand up here and say he felt like he didn't have the playbook. I've heard y'all say that. That's just how it was for me. I was constant fear. I'm going to get on the wrong bus, whatever. I couldn't really do life, but I did the best I could, so I just tried real hard. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to try real hard. And I did okay, but with my dad, the first time I ever thought about so when I started doubting God, for me, if there's not a God, then I'm it. And that's just the way I acted. So I remember my dad was torturing my mom, I would say, not so much physically, I just mean mentally. Like it was just terrible, So for her and for us. And let me say this before I go any further. The older I get, the better my childhood gets. When I look back at it, okay, so I was in the know, but my mom would say things to me like, son, he's sick. And I'd say things back to her like, well, murderers are sick, but it don't make it right. And so I remember thinking one day, you know what? One day I'm going to be old enough and I'm going to be God. And he ain't going to do that to my mama no more. And then that day happened. I used to run a plant. Me and John was talking about it right through the woods here. I ran a plant for a while over here, and I remember my mom called me and said, your daddy's going crazy. And I said, I'll be right there. And when I come through the door, he'd been flipping over furniture and he tore the curtains off the wall. And he charged me. And the look in his eyes, is just evil. And when we hit each other and went down to the ground, whatever's going on, I remember my mama screaming and saying, oh my God, Mark. And I looked at her, and she was more scared of the chaos I was causing than she had been of him, I think. So I drank a lot. I was a blackout drinker. And I remember Tom I'd stand up here and say I remember him saying this, and he hit home with me. He said that the thing about blackouts are you can't defend yourself. People can tell you whatever happened, and it happened. Well, you can't say it didn't, But so I did some other things that didn't cause blackouts later in life. And the thing about that is you can remember what you did. I remember thinking that. I want no blackout. I know when I did that. I'm no good. I'm just no good. That's the way I felt. So things progressed. I just started drinking. It was all just having fun for me. I just staying away from my house as much as I could. Didn't want to be around it. Didn't want to have any involvement with it. I love my family, but I just didn't want to be around them. So I moved out when I was 17. Moved down to Wilmington and moved in with my brother down there, one that just above me, and worked with him down there. And just things got worse. I was drinking harder, just more and more drinking, and we eventually moved back here with a little business, and that didn't make it. So before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, every business I ever worked for, I stole from. And I'm not talking about time. I'm talking about tangible thing, product, money. I was a thief. That's what I was, a liar and a cheat. And So we had this business. It didn't make it. It probably would have made it if I hadn't worked there. Possibly anyway. It had a better shot. But I ended up working at Ingersoll Rand. Back then it was Arrow. Some of y'all might remember that. And I went and worked at Arrow. And I was a pretty good machine operator. They trained me how to run a CNC machine. And I was a pretty good machine operator. Worked there for about 5 years. And while I was there, I started to, that business we came back with, let me tell you this real quick. That business we opened, that's where I met my wife. She was 17. The end of May we'll be married 30 years. And we dated for 6 years before that. Man, thank you, AA. Let me tell you, that thing was about over. It was all but over when I come in here. But when I started dating her, some people don't believe this. Is just, I'm going to tell you the way it was for me. When I seen her, I knew I wanted to be with her the rest of my life. She came in to apply for a job at this business, and when she walked in, I knew in my heart I want to be with her. And I ended up being with her. She was innocent 17-year-old. She's still in high school. And the reason I'm telling you that is she was completely innocent when she met me. Just a young girl, just beautiful. And by the end of my drinking and drugging, I remember yelling at her across the bar in our house, things that were so vile, so ugly, and she wouldn't even cry no more. I'd done hardened her. Here's the deal, is the things that I was holding against my daddy, I was doing the same things. So anyway, I got this job, and we dated for a long time. We dated for 6 years, and we got married at the end of May. I got this job with Arrow while we were dating, and then it turned into Ingersoll Rand, and I started going to school over at Sand Hills, and I got a little manufacturing engineering degree, and did pretty good with it. I started running a plant over here eventually in Aberdeen, right through the woods, and started making, I come in as an industrial engineer and started making a little money, and I worked real hard. What I really did there was I did whatever I had to do to get ahead. So I was a manipulator, boy. So I knew I was up against people with like 4 and 6 year degrees, and I got a little 2-year associate degree. So I'd do things like come in at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they'd come in at 8. And they'd leave at 5, and I'd stay to 6:30. When the plant manager come through and they did something wrong, I'd make sure he knew it. And when I did something right, I made sure he knew it. When nobody was around. And the next thing you know, over time, like I'm getting these raises, I'm making pretty good money, and I'm running the place. The whole time I'm running, I'm scared. So I'll tell you all about this reoccurring nightmare I have. I hadn't worked in that place since 2006, but I have this reoccurring nightmare that I'm working there and I'm about to lose my job. I've had that recently, like in the last week. And it's just that old fear where I'm making this salary now. It's a big salary. How am I going to sustain this? I'm scared to death. I asked my wife if she had recurring nightmares like that, and she said, well, not really like that. She said, I have this nightmare that I'm late for an exam. So it's like she had a nightmare about not being prepared for life. I had a nightmare about not being able to do life. And it still shows up. But so I need to hurry up. But here's what happened: was I ran the plant, and I started to have some success financially, and I would still pray. I remember praying when I first got the job, but eventually I stopped and I talked to Mom. We might go around at Christmas, we have a prayer or something, but I started to feel like I didn't need God. Because the truth was I'd been doubting God for a long time. And one day my brother, he called me. He said, "You need to meet me at the house." And I met him at the house, and he said, "We got to take Daddy down to the police station." And he got some charges. I remember he looked at me and he said, "What do you think about this?" And I said, "I don't know what to think. The truth is, what I was thinking is, I can't stand you." When he died, I never fixed that while he was alive. He died. When he died, he knew I didn't like him, and I knew I didn't like him. I let him die like that. After coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, what I learned was I didn't like me. So what I did was I just stopped going around my mama. Everybody, I didn't want to be around them. I didn't want to be around my dad. I just wrote them off. I talked to my mom and everything, but I didn't want to be around them until I needed something. Anyway, so time went on. I thought I was a pretty good husband and a pretty good daddy. Had a nice house over in, we still live in it, Sandhurst South. The only reason we have it is because my wife's name was on it too. If it had just been my name, the big book says it. If it wasn't for my wife, I wouldn't have nothing. I'd have sold everything. I sold everything I could possibly get rid of, had my name on it, and then started trying to get after what she had her name on. Best way I could, manipulate it, and then it's just what I did. So I thought I was a pretty good daddy because we had this nice house. I got this good job. There's four-wheelers out back, boats, trucks, swimming pool, you know. And so I'm a good daddy. But my two boys is out there sitting by that swimming pool on them poles crying while I'm inside doing the same things that their mama and my daddy was doing to mine. I didn't realize I was teaching them how not to treat women. Teaching them the wrong way to treat women, however you want to put it. So anyway, that went on for a while, and then just the nature of my addiction, I started to steal. So I'm a convicted felon. I've been charged with multiple felonies. I ain't proud of them, just telling you what it is. I've only ever been convicted of one. That was enough. Get me in here. So, first time I got arrested, my wife bonded me out. Got a bondsman, got me out. And I went to court for those. It was 14 felonies. I went to court and got them reduced to 2 misdemeanors and some probation. And I didn't do one thing probation told me to do. I didn't do it. I was getting ready to get violated and go into prison. But what happened is I got stopped, and I got stopped by a narcotics officer, and I had some cocaine in my pocket, and I had a notepad in my pocket, and he was by himself. I had 2 other guys with me. I'm on probation, and there's some guns in the car, and they're not legal. I'm not going to get in all that, but here's what happened. He got me out of the car, and he patted me down real quick. He didn't find anything, so he started searching the car. Like, he just patted me down real quick. And so I ate the opioid, but I didn't do anything with the cocaine. I left it in my pocket. Boy, in the jail, I went through that thing 1,000 times in my head. Why didn't I get rid of that? I believe it was divine intervention. And that's why I'm here tonight. The last thing he did when he was done, he said, come back over here. And he said, turn your pockets inside out. And when I did, he said, put your hands behind your back. And he put me in a Nissan truck. He was undercover, and when I got in the front of the truck I said, man, please don't do this. I'm going to lose everything. It'll be over my wife, my kids, my house. I'm going to lose everything. I said, please don't take me to jail, man. I'll do whatever. Don't. He said, oh, no, you're going to jail. He said, can't you see what you're doing to your family? He said, why don't you get some help? I didn't know he was talking stuff to me, but he was. So he took me to jail, and by this time I was doing, the opioid thing, and boy, I was sick. Man, I was sick. And my brother got me out of jail on house arrest, and I ended up going to treatment. I called, my wife called me while I got to call her from jail, I started us crying and begging, and she said, no, you're not coming back here. She said, tomorrow I'm filing for separation. And she said, it'll take a year to get a divorce. We'll see what you do about your problem in a year. So when I got out of jail, I called a girl over in Moore County, a pretrial counselor, and I said, I need some help. I want to go away for a year. Because that's the number I heard, right? She said, you don't need a year. You just need 28 days in Rockingham. That's what you need to go do. So that's what I did. Ended up going down there to Treatment Center, Samaritan Colony, and when I went in there, when I went in there, I wasn't up to nothing. I was just, matter of fact, my wife did talk to me right before I went in there, and I told her, I said, listen, I'm not going to quit drinking. And I ain't going to be no Bible thumper. And she just, at that point, just, okay, whatever. She just want me gone, So I went to treatment down there, and first couple of weeks I didn't do any, I was doing the minimum what I had to do, but just enough to stay off the radar, because I know I needed to finish it, but I had no chance of getting back into the house or whatever. But Harold down there, I was down there on the anniversary of his son's death. His son died as a result of this disease. And it had only been 3 or 4 years. And I couldn't stand Harold. I mean, I remember he told me, he said, you get to listen to King Baby today. Yeah. And then he said, that's a good one for you. Well, I listened to that thing. I said, man, I got so mad. He was telling me the truth, what it was. He was telling me the truth, but I got so mad, I just didn't like him. What I didn't like was the truth. He just kept putting the truth. Just putting the truth. Just putting the truth. I remember he said, what do you do for a living? I said, he'll tell this story. He likes to tell it. He said, I said, I'm a 6-figure man. He said, oh yeah, how long has it been since you made those? You get paid for the treatment. So it had been sick. But here's the deal. I had to talk about that job because I knew in my heart I'm nothing. All I had was talk. So I talked about it, but anyway, we're there, and they're working on me, and I'm really, it's just, reminds me of Fred's story in the big book and more about alcoholism, how they're trying to tell me, like, this is a better way, and I'm thinking, hey, all that's fine and good, but I don't want nothing to do with it. But what happened was, I'm in there, and he gets up, we're doing church, he gets up behind the podium and says, and I don't like it, and it's about my second week in there, and he starts crying, talking about his son. And something happened. And I started crying. I don't know really what it was. Maybe my life was passing me by. Maybe I'm thinking about my boys. But I know this. I made my mind up then. I took a third step right then. I said, I made my mind up to do this thing. And that following Monday, I moved from a seat in the back of the class. I moved for the very front of the class and started looking him in the eyes and paying attention. And this thing happened where he would look me in the eyes. I believe he's just waiting for me to engage. And then I started to learn some things. I did my first 4th and 5th step in treatment, and I started to learn things like the reason I didn't like my daddy is because I was scared to death that I was going to be like him. And I already was. I started to, my wife, she wrote me a letter while I was in treatment, said, will you sign the house over to me? Because I'm afraid we're going to lose it based on some things you've done. And when I was going in treatment, I was thinking, you know what, I'll show her I'll get out of the house, I'll get my car, I'll get the boys, you know. And by the third week, my thinking was starting to change. I wrote her a letter and said, send the paperwork, I'll sign it. Whatever, just take care of the boys, you know, and yourself. And so you get a phone call in there, and I call her, and she didn't want me to come home, and so the last week I'm in there, that last Friday, supposed to leave on Monday. I called her and said, she said, I don't want you to come home. And they wouldn't send me to a halfway house. So my counselor kept saying, man, we send you to a halfway house, you're going to grow apart from your family, you'll never get back to them. And he knew, though, she's a good lady. I was sharing my mail with him, and he knew she was good, it's a good environment. So anyway, here's what happened. She came to visitation that Sunday, and in church, Harold said, so I'd had to ask Harold to stay another 28 days. You know, I'd already been there 28. And he said, if you pay another $2,500, I ain't paid the first $2,500. You know, I thought he was kidding, but I wasn't going to ask him again. I meant they've been talking to us about letting go, so I ain't asking him again. You know, and that Sunday in church, he said, we're grateful Mark's willing to stay another 28 days. So I leaned over to my wife and said, I'm going to stay another 28 days. And she said, we'll talk about it. And after church, we went out in the parking lot. And she said, we've been talking. Me and the boys want you to come home. And I've been home ever since. And my marriage has been better for the last 11 years. I can't, we were talking about it earlier, it's hard to describe. It's just hard to describe. Like, every now and then I have to pinch myself, really. Like, really, is this my life? My life went from being that, completely afraid and scared, troubled and all that, to this. I've had 2 marriages and I've been married once. I'll take the second one. My boys are 25 and 23 now, and they love me. I'm a good daddy. And what I did was they turned me loose from the colony. The treatment did a lot of stuff for me, but what really did, a lot of what it did was they hand walked me through the first 5 steps of the 12 steps. They exposed me to it. And I started to get some relief as a result of that. Enough relief that I was interested to continue. And Frank was my sponsor, and I remember he was coming down there to the treatment center, and I didn't like him. Well, I tend not to like people trying to help me for some reason. But anyway, I remember he was sitting out there, he's talking to somebody. This is my first real interaction with Frank, and they was talking about drinking, and I'm standing there, and I said, well, I ain't drank in 12 years, and I haven't. And except for that 6-pack I drank before I went to treatment. I was trying to get the sickness off of me and it didn't work. But Frank said, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but he looked at me, he was sitting in his chair there, and he said, what'd you do, smoke crack? He turned back around like that and kept talking. I thought, man, you jerk. Couldn't stand him. So I'm coming back to Aberdeen, and I said, okay, now I'm in. Like, I'm getting ready to do this thing. And they said, I said, I need a sponsor. I told Robert, and he said, there's a guy coming down here Tuesday night, you should talk to him about it. And I said, you talking about Frank? He said, yeah. I said, well, I don't like him. And he said, you ain't got to like him. I really don't have to like him. He knows about this, you know. So, whew, glad to be on this side. So, anyway, here's what happened. He come down, and I said, Frank, they told me to ask you about getting a sponsor. He said, you asking me to sponsor you? I said, well, I guess so. And he said, well, ask me then. So I asked him, and he asked me the 2 questions. He said, are you done? Are you willing to go to any length? And I wanted to answer him right then. You know the story. He said, no, I'll wait and answer me later. And he went out and he sat down in the chapel. And I went out there and I said, when am I supposed to answer this question? I was out there spinning around. And he said, well, I believe you already did. And then he started telling me things like, first thing he ever told me, he said, listen, when we have a thought of drinking, he did things like that. He said, what we do is we pray and we ask God to remove the obsession so we can serve him and others. And it began. That's the way it started with me. I left there and I started meeting him here. He'd sit right there, I'd sit right there, and we'd read. We'd meet on Wednesday nights. He normally met on Sunday mornings. I almost lost him as a sponsor because he wanted me to meet him on Sunday mornings, and I was going to church down there with my family on Sunday morning. So I made up my mind I was going to get somebody else as a sponsor, and a guy by the name of Charlie Stillwell. He's not here anymore. He went to Frank and told him why I couldn't meet with him on Sunday morning. And Frank come to me and told me we'd meet on Wednesday night. Well, I'm grateful for that. Grateful for Charlie. So we worked the steps. And we read the book from the very beginning. Y'all know the story from the cover all the way through the book. And I felt like we were sometimes I felt like we were rushing through it. And sometimes I felt like we were dragging. Whatever, I just did whatever he told me. Every now and then he'd forget whatever. I don't know why he wouldn't be here. And it's probably because it's Wednesday night and it's supposed to be everybody else Sunday. But I know this. I was here. And it happened just like it was supposed to happen. In 7 months, we were through the steps. I sat right where Alicia's sitting and did my fifth step with him on a Sunday morning. Called Harold and said, I won't be at church today because I'm going to do my fifth step with Frank. And he said, good. And I sat there and did a fifth step with him and told him stuff that I wouldn't tell down at the colony. And I remember it was a couple of those things were tough, and he just said, just say it. Just say it. And I just said it. And we got done, and he said, man, I believe you've done the best you could with this. Thank God, man. So we got done with that, and we read through 6 and 7, did those, and then he had me make my list of amends, and then he told me, he gave me a script to follow. It was such a simple script on making amends, so simple. I thought, how could that possibly work? But I've made every amends I've ever made with that simple script, and it works perfectly. I've had people I owe money to, and I try to pay them money, and they say things like, no, you don't owe me nothing. You just keep living the way you live it. I called him up, and I said, he won't let me pay him. He said, well, that ain't up to you. What did he tell you? I said, he told me keep living the way you're living. He said, well, that's the tough one. He said, the guy's name is Steve Rockwell. He's Rockwell Towing. And so what I do with him is I call him about every other month, and I say, hey, I'm making my payment. I'm still living the way I'm living. I was living, we have a good laugh about it. But so then when we got up to step 10 and 11, Frank told me, he said, next time somebody asks you to sponsor them, you remember the 2 questions? I want you to ask them the 2 questions. He taught me the steps. I learned them in here. And then he taught me how to take somebody else through the steps. And when I started taking other people through the steps, that's when my life really started to get better. Like it just took off, man. This thing just rocketed, like Bill Wilson said, into the 4th dimension. And now and I learned more and more as me and another man would take the steps together again, I'd learn more and more about the book. I learned more and more about it. I'd hear more and more in the rooms about it. I was just immersed in it. Right? I wanted to learn more and more. I'm listening to speaker tapes. I had a guy I was working for. He loved a Bible. He gave me a little Gideon's Bible years ago. He said, put it in your back pocket. It's something about having the Word on you. And he was teaching me like the Bible while Frank and you guys were teaching me the big book. And man, it's just going. It's going like it really is. I'm growing, and things are getting better. And, those charges, I thought I was going to prison, I'm not going to prison. The judge said, go home, keep doing what you're doing. Like, wow, okay. And it's just the way it went for me. And then, what I learned about the Bible and the big book, they're telling me the same thing. Don't be so selfish and self-centered. Do more for others than you do for yourself. Things like if you ain't working to make somebody else's life better, your life ain't getting better. Money started not to be the big motivating factor. Just what the big book says, like a whole new set of motives and priorities. And I make less money now as an adult than I did way back then, but I've got more money. I am financially secure. I ain't rich, but I don't worry about making my payments no more. All my payments are made. You couldn't measure my credit when I come in here. I don't know if they have a measuring device for that or not. I mean, that's what I did was abuse credit cards and just everything I could. And today I get anything I want. You know, I remember, it's interesting, I just to share some of my experience with you. I remember my son, my 23-year-old, he just turned 16 or 17, he wanted a four-wheeler. And he wanted to finance. He had about $4,000 to put down on it. And he wanted to go down to Rockingham and look at one. And my wife said, I'm not signing the note. She said, you can sign it if you want. I'm okay with you signing it, but I'm not signing it. Well, I went down there with him. His eyes just lit up when he seen them four-wheelers. I was so scared my credit wouldn't be good enough to get him a four-wheeler. But we filled out the application. And the man come back out there and he said, you can get two, anything you want in here. Woo! Thanks AA, you know. Man, what a feeling though. I went from stealing from them, you know, and then my kids, I'd steal out the piggy bank. I'd take whatever I had to take to get what I had to get. And so today I just, biggest thing I want to be is around to help them. I don't have to hurt them no more. That's a good deal, man, when you don't have to hurt the people you love no more. You get to wake up with peace, go to bed with peace. So I'm going to tell you the hot water heater story. A lot of people like that one. I've left a lot out. I'm sorry. So really, there's just not enough time to talk about what AA has done for me. I was in terrible shape at 44. I was one of the ones the big book calls pretty badly mangled. And I'd been restored by Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's why I keep doing Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've had times where I didn't have people to go through the big book with. And I prayed for 12-step work. And I had a string of just good old-fashioned 12-step calls where somebody calls and say, hey, my son's drinking or he's using, can you come talk to him? So I grab somebody else and we go talk to him. And so I've been able to experience that. And I'm reading with people right now, sponsor people right now, and I've got people I've sponsoring people right now, and my sponsor's sponsoring people, and he's got a sponsor, and it's all just AA. That's my whole life is AA. So I was thinking, I've said this in here before, like my painter's in AA, my yardman's in AA, my electrician's in AA, the guy that rebuilt my siding on my house is in AA, and about the only dude that serves my house that ain't in AA is the mailman. And I was looking at him the other day. I said, he might need to be in AA. But this kid, I don't know, the mailman. But it's just my whole life. I'm surrounded by people in recovery, and they're the best people I've ever dealt with in my life. I used to think people that were spiritual were weak. And what I know now is they're the strongest men and women I've ever met in my life and I've ever dealt with. The key ingredient, though, was I was ready and I was willing. I did what I was told. I really did the best I could. And I still talk to my sponsor. But anyway, the hot water heater story. So I'm sick. I'm withdrawing. I'm sick. I'm laying on my couch. This is coming up on the end. And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get some money. I've been through all my money. I'm trying to get at the little bit of money my wife's got squirreled away to try and take care of our family. And I come up with this idea. I went under the house and cut the hot water heater off. And I come upstairs and run some hot water and got back on the couch. See, I hadn't worked in a while, just hustling and running around. And waited for her. I was sick. I couldn't sleep. And I waited for her to get up and go to work. And she got up and she went in to take a shower and she come out and she said, Mark, there's something the matter with the hot water heater. I said, okay, I'll go check it out. And I went downstairs and laid on the ground. And acted like I was checking on something. I was down there just, laying on the ground. And I come back up and I said, it's ruined. We got to have a new one. And she said, how much will that cost? I said, I'm pretty slick. I said, if we cost a guy I know, a buddy of mine, we can probably get a new one installed for $500 if we pay in cash. She wrote me a check for cash. She took a cold shower and went to work. I waited for 9 o'clock for the bank to open, went down, cut the hot water heater on, and went to the bank and went and got it. That's just one story of many, many. Now the rest of that story is early in recovery. I know that hot water heater down there is about 23 years old. He's down there cooking. I know, man, like I'm on, and I'm thinking one day I'm going to have to face that music. And 3 years later, I was driving to work to Samaritan Colony, and she called and she said, Mark, there's something the matter with the hot water heater. And I said, she said, did you really replace it? Let me tell you now, everything in me wanted to lie. Everything in me wanted to lie. I like 5 or 6 lies went through my head. Yeah, I knew I couldn't trust that dude. Yeah, you know, I was using with him, and he was, but here's what I said. I said, now you know I didn't. And she said, well, we'll get a new one then. And my point about that is, I can tear everything down with just a senseless lie. Ruin all that trust I built up in 3 years. And I remember when she sat in the gazebo out there at the colony, she told me, she said, I'll never, ever, 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 ever trust you again. And she trusts me now more than she ever did when we were dating, when we first met or anything, and that's because of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, one of the goals I had coming out of the colony is I had stole so much from her. They had you write down like short-term goals, and I said I'd like to deposit a check in my wife's account without her knowing. You know, just like I used to steal from her without her knowing. And I get to do that today. You know, when we're together, I pay. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous done for me. I don't have to, but I do. Let's see, is there anything else? Man, that hour went by quick. Hope y'all got something out of it. Again, I just, and then the last thing I'm going to say, Mary Kay. I was sitting way back in the back in an early speaker meeting, and Mary Kay was telling her story up here. And she made this comment. She was telling people just what I'm telling you, I think. She was saying how good life is when you do this. And she said this. She said, I wish I could just put it in you. That hit me. I'll never forget it. It was 11 years ago. Almost 11 years ago. A little over 10 years ago. So, 10 years and about 8 months. But I remember thinking, like, she means that. Her life is really good. The truth is, on my own, I built a life I didn't want. And with AA's help, I built a life on good, great relationships that I love to have. Thanks for letting me share.